Good afternoon, colleagues. I would like to call the 8th meeting of London City Council to order. As always, we would like to start with our land acknowledgement. And we are acknowledging that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewak, and Adarwandaran peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. We acknowledge all the treaties that are specific to this area. The Two-Row Wampum Belt Treaty of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Silver Covenant Chain, the Beaver Hunting Grounds of the Haudenosaunee Nanfan Treaty of 1701, the McKee Treaty of 1790, and the London Township Treaty of 1796, as well as the Huron Tract Treaty of 1827 with the Anishinaabe and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. The three Indigenous nations that are neighbors to London are the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation, all who continue to live as sovereign nations with individual and unique languages, cultures, and customs. Colleagues, I would like to now, as is our custom at Council, open with the national anthem. And I would like to take an opportunity to introduce this meeting's anthem singer. With influences ranging from Hank Williams and Elvis Presley to Luke Bryan and Eric Church, the Scott Howarth Band brings a mix of traditional and modern country music with a hint of rock and roll for an uplifting slice of country music with heartfelt lyrics, infectious guitar, and catchy harmonies and anthemic choruses. The Scott Howarth Band was formed by a great group of friends with a passion for making music together. Having played together on various projects over the years, they felt it was time to pool their creative talents towards a common sound. And through time together on the road and in the studio, the Scott Howarth Band is a group of brothers separated at birth and reunited through music. The Scott Howarth Band has been nominated twice for a London Music Award, the first in 2021 in the Fan Favorite category, and then again in 2022 as Country Artist of the Year. 4 of the band's releases have peaked at #2 on the Canadian Country Countdown. And if you have not heard any of them, I strongly recommend you visit Spotify and give a listen to The Music Made Me Do It. That would be my personal favorite. I am pleased to welcome the band's lead singer and songwriter and a personal friend, Scott Howarth, to join us in leading the national anthem.
The true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Thank you so much.
And we're going to pause for just a moment so I can present Scott a certificate. I just want to share Scott is a much better singer than he is a hockey coach. He and I only shared the bench once this season, but we are proud to say we're undefeated. Our record was 0-0-1. We tied. Before we move on to the agenda itself, I will just remind everyone that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communications supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact councilagenda@london.ca or phone 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Before we move into the agenda, I will look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, our next item on the agenda is recognitions. We have 3 recognitions today, and I am going to start by calling on Councillor Rahman to join me at the podium.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite our honored guest, Guru Nanak Society, Mission Society, to come forward. Thank you. So today sets call, first everyone, and a warm welcome to Sikh Heritage Month. A Sikh is someone who's committed to learning about their true self and leading a holistic lifestyle, emphasizing equality, treating everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of gender, caste, race, or religion. Canada and the Sikhs have a rich history dating back to the 1800s, making significant contributions to Canada, including the Canadian Pacific Railway, in lumber mills, and in mines. In addition, many served in the British Armed Forces. Racist ignorance of the East meant that Sikhs were met with opposition in the face of racist immigration laws and workplace policies. These policies are behind us, but there's still work to do. Today, Sikh Canadians make up approximately 2.12% of the total Canadian population. Canada has the second largest Sikh population in the world. They are leaders in diverse fields, including business, healthcare, education, and arts. This month, I encourage you to learn a bit more about the history and the core teachings of Sikhism, the qualities of service to others, and treating everyone with kindness and respect. Upcoming events in our community include opportunities to learn more. You'll see things like the Turban Up at Western, Vaisakhi Day at Stony Creek Library and Bostwick Library, and Sikh history exhibits. A very special thank you to Guru Nanak Society for your work on organizing community events throughout this month, and I'll let you speak a little bit more about those.
Thank you, everyone. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I would like to say thank you, everyone, for inviting me and my team to speak today. Heartfelt thank you for our Honorable Mayor Josh Morgan, Councillors Corinne Rahman, and all the councillors and staff members of City of London who always support us, recognize us, and lead our way to spread more positivity, to share our values with the London community and give us reason to be always graceful. Thank you to each of every one of you support proclamation of April as a Sikh Heritage Month. It is important that we recognize the contribution of Sikh Canadians and also to learn more about the background of Sikh religions. Our roots teach us to be a kind, humble, and love all. It teaches us to real values of equality, social justice, service, and humanity. We recognize the Sikh Heritage Month with the exhibitions depicting Sikh values, teachings of our gurus, and important contribution of Sikh leaders and women in our history. Those who have not visited exhibition yet, we have sent email yesterday to all the councillors. Please share in the City Hall and have an opportunity to know us more about us. Again, thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
For our next recognition, I will call on Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Colleagues, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and celebrate Londoner Jeremy Hansen, who we learned yesterday was selected by NASA to partake in the first trip to lunar space in over half a century. What's more, when Jeremy and the Artemis II blast off in November of next year, he will become the first Canadian in our country's history to venture into deep space and traveling farther away from good old planet Earth than any other human before with his 3 crewmates. Jeremy's journey to the stars and beyond began at the age of 12 when he joined the 614 Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron here in London. In the years since, he has inspired and educated countless numbers of Canadians and will do so once more next year as part of this historic mission. Like many others in our city, I was ecstatic when I heard the news of Jeremy's selection yesterday. It brought back memories of when I was that kid on the living room floor, staying up past my bedtime in my pajamas with my brother, watching Neil Armstrong take the first step on the moon. And at that time, I thought, by the time I get old enough, I'll be landing on Mars. Well, unfortunately, I don't have quite the skill set for that. And the Apollo program was canceled in the 70s. So I hope that there'll be some young Londoners that will be watching this, not in their small black and white TV, but on their iPhone probably, that will be inspired by Jeremy over the next coming months. This excitement will only build in the lead up to next year's launch date, while also serving as a source of substantial civic pride. So on behalf of all Londoners, we congratulate Jeremy on this remarkable achievement, and we'll be watching with great excitement as he makes Canadian deep space history next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. And I will say, I'm not old enough to remember that moon landing, but I'm sure I will be inspired by Mr. Hansen's trip. Colleagues, we do have one more somber recognition that I would like to give today. And I would like to recognize that last month, friends and family mourned the passing of John Jardine. Born in Saskatoon, John came to London, as many young people do, to pursue post-secondary education at Westminster College, Western University, where he studied to become a civil engineer. And after working for several construction companies in the USA, John returned to London with his wife Lorraine to raise their family. After a stint with Sifton Properties, John joined the City of London family as our water operations manager before ultimately taking on the role of city engineer from 1992 to 2001. So I ask you now to stand and join me in a moment of silence as we remember John and his service to our community. Thank you. Please be seated. While not technically a recognition, I am going to ask one more person to speak before we move on in our agenda. As you can clearly see, I am not Mayor Morgan. Although the seat is comfortable, I am only borrowing it temporarily. Mayor Morgan is, however, joining us by Zoom to participate in today's meeting. He is up on the screen, and Your Worship, I will turn to you to let colleagues know why you're unable to join us in person today.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for chairing the meeting today. Colleagues, I'm just on my way to Toronto for meetings with the Health Minister on the health and homelessness file. As colleagues will recall, the Ontario Big City Mayors called for an emergency meeting between that group and the Minister and the government on the significant impacts that cities are facing with health and homelessness, mental health and addictions. And that meeting has been granted. Unfortunately, it was today because Mayor Patterson from Kingston and I have taken a lead with OBCM on the health and homelessness file because of the great work that both of our communities are doing. And let me just once again commend everybody involved in the health and homelessness summits for positioning London very well to be a leader on this. But that leadership comes with a requirement to come and be represent all of OBCM in those meetings with the minister today. And we hope to have a great dialogue and make significant progress. I anticipate, given the timing of the meeting, I'll be able to participate remotely through the whole meeting. But I will be remote for most of this meeting. So again, thanks colleagues for understanding, and I'll look forward to participating at strategic points in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moving on in our agenda, item 3 is our review of confidential matters to be considered in public. I am aware of none. Item 4 is our council in closed session. So I am going to look for a motion to move in camera so that we can deal with those confidential matters. For those members of the public, we will have to ask you to leave the gallery while we deal with those. I do not anticipate us being in camera particularly long, but that is always the will of council as they discuss the items that are in confidential session. Once we are done, we will return to public session. We will unlock the doors and invite you back in for the rest of the meeting. So I'll look for a motion to go in camera, moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Cuddy, and we will ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
Yes.
Do we have mine hasn't come up?
We can mark you as yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Presiding Officer, I'll note that there's a lot of belongings left in the gallery up top.
Thank you, Councillor Pelosa. We'll ask security to go through and invite the members of the public to remove their items from the gallery.
Mayor Morgan, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0. For the benefit of the public, that vote was related to 3 matters indicated on the public agenda relating to personal matters of an identifiable individual, solicitor client privileged advice, litigation, potential litigation, and another matter related to litigation, potential litigation with respect to appeals arising out of the Victoria Park Secondary Plan at the Ontario Land Tribunal.
All right, colleagues, we will just have a brief wait while we make sure that the gallery All right, the clerk advises me that the live streams are back up as well. We can proceed. So we will move on with item 5 on the agenda. That is the confirmation and signing of minutes of the previous meetings. We have 2 sets of meetings, the 6th meeting held on March the 7th and the 7th special meeting held on March 28th. I think we can move those together unless anyone feels otherwise. So we'll look for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Rahman. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Councillor Trasso? Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 6, communications and petitions. We have several related to a number of different items. 6.1 is related to the LPS board appointment. 6.2 is related to an item on the planning committee. And 6.3 is the infrastructure update related to the Thames pool. I would look for a mover and a seconder to refer all of those communications to the appropriate items on the agenda. Moved by Councillor Hillier and seconded by Councillor Rahman. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Councillor Trasso? I vote yes. Thank you. Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
On item 7, motions of which notice is given, I am aware of none. Moving on to item 8, reports of standing committees. Normally, I would present the strategic priorities and policy committees, but as I am chairing today, and I have asked Councillor Lehman to report out on both of these for us. So I will call on Councillor Lehman for item 8.1, the 11th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I've had no requests to pull any of the items on the 11th report of SPPC. So I'll turn it back to you.
Look to see if anyone wants anything pulled to be dealt with separately. Seeing none, so Councillor Lehman, you're moving the report in its entirety?
I am.
And we will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on, the next item is 8.2, the 12th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. So we'll get Councillor Lehman to remain standing and present that.
Thank you. I'll be pulling number 5, 4.2, consideration of appointment to the London Police Services Board. I've had no other request for any other items to be pulled.
Okay, so you're moving everything except item 5.
Correct.
We'll look to see if there's any questions or comments. While colleagues consider whether they have any questions or comments, I will look to our city manager just to see if she wants to offer any brief update on the strategic plan draft development, as I know that that's on both of the SPPC agendas, and I think we're getting close to the finish line. So Ms. Livingston, did you want to give us just a very brief verbal?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Council has done a tremendous amount of work over the last number of months, and over those meetings in March, worked to make final changes to all aspects of the strategic plan. Staff are working right now to incorporate those and return to Council a report for April 17th, where you can review the final version of the strategic plan in its totality for any final, hopefully minor, changes on the 17th, viewing April 25th Council meeting to finalize your strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston, and I will just say on behalf of all of Council, thank you to you and all your staff, particularly Ms. Wilcox and Mr. Steinberg, who have been asked to make lots of changes, incorporate lots of things on the fly, and have just been stalwart in getting things back to us as quickly as possible. So we really appreciate the effort, and we look forward to hopefully getting things finalized with you at the next SPPC. So we will call a vote on the 12th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, all items with the exception of 5, which was 4.2 on the committee agenda, the consideration of the appointment to the LPS board.
Councillor Trosso? Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, everyone. Councillor Lehman, item 5 from the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, the consideration of the appointment to the London Police Services Board. Are you prepared to put that on the floor?
Yeah, so SPPC made a recommendation to Council, and I will put that on the floor now.
All right, and I know that a motion has been circulated by Mayor Morgan and Councillor Frank, so I will look to Mayor Morgan now to put his motion on the floor.
Thank you, and I'm getting a little bit of challenge with the connection, so let me know if you can't hear me. I'll keep my camera off just for this part, just to keep some bandwidth. But I do appreciate the ability to put a motion on the floor, and I want to thank yourself, Councillor Frank, and Councillor Hopkins for having a discussion about the motion for consideration. Let me just read the content of the motion, and then I'm happy to provide some detail on why I think this is an important motion. So the motion is that the matter of an appointment to the London Police Services Board, including all 54 applications received, be referred to the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee meeting in order to determine a short list of 5 candidates for interviews. It being noted that the interviews will be conducted by the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee.
And I will just ask Councillor Frank to confirm that she's seconding that. And I'm seeing nods. So, Your Worship, we've got the motion moved and seconded. If you'd like to speak to it now, this is your opportunity to do so.
Thank you, and I will. And I know the others who I worked with on the motion would be happy to share some context, so I won't say anything. I'll certainly leave some space for them to add their comments. But I want to say over the past week, I've certainly been doing a lot of listening, been having a lot of conversations, and really watching the discussion around this appointment to a very critical board at a very important time in our city. I would say there's been a lot of discussion from my observation in the community about diversity. There's been a lot of discussion about merit. And there is another piece to this that I want to add into the discussion. As someone who, from the outright on this council, has tried to drive, a wide-ranging consensus on issues to try to pull colleagues together and find, a wider general consensus on issues. I think that there's a piece of this that is really important, and that is there are significant problems with the process that we follow to fill these appointments. There are systemic issues with the way that our process is designed. It is not leading to results that all members of council are supportive of. And for the second time, we approach a situation where members of council, and I think at least half of the members of council are willing to, again, review and move beyond the process that we've agreed to in our policies to try to look at a way to find a better path forward. That tells me that we need to fix that. And I know, Deputy Mayor, you and I have talked about you bringing forward at the next SPPC direction to the governance working group to take a look at that, at the way that we fill vacancies on applications and fix that process so that we can find a generally agreed upon way for council to move forward with these critical vacancy appointments. However, we're not there yet. And so I believe what this motion does is it is an effort to try to find that greater consensus for council. When you think about it, we have only expressed to each other our opinions on 3 candidates with votes. And yet many of us ranked 8, 9, 10 candidates through the process. And yet there's been no opportunity for us to share those preferences, share the reasons for them, or let the candidates in the process express themselves in a way beyond simply putting words on a piece of paper, which we all know is not the best way to communicate how you want to serve, what you can offer to a board, and what vision you might have for the police service in London moving forward. I'd like us to find someone who has the broad support of council. It doesn't do council any good. It doesn't do the community any good, and it doesn't do the successful candidate any good, and it certainly doesn't do the board any good if we send them a candidate that is narrowly supported. That is not, where we need to be as a council. And I believe an interview process where we have the opportunity to come together, to share our preferences, to put some names forward that we can give them the opportunity to express themselves in the way that they want to express themselves, to share their thoughts on how they can contribute to this board, to share what they feel is a priority for us in our decision-making on this, I think provides an opportunity for us to come to a much wider consensus as a council. So I'll leave my comments at that there. I know others might have something to add, but I really appreciate colleagues for considering this motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got Councillor Frank and then Councillor Hopkins on the speakers list. If anybody else wants to speak to this, let me know. Councillor Frank.
Thank you, yes. And I was happy to second this because I know that we've been getting lots of communication from the public, and I think we've heard a lot from the community that they'd like us to reconsider this vote. And I think we owe it to both the candidates and the community to take some time to do a more thorough process that, as the mayor said, gathers more consensus instead of a split vote. And I think we need to recognize the current concerns that we've been hearing in the community. We've been given an excellent slate of candidates, 54 very exceptional and diverse candidates to look through. And I think it's an opportunity for us to take that pause in the consideration of those various candidates. I didn't know that in the past council has done interviews for various boards and commissions. I didn't know that was an option. So when I heard that was a possibility, I think it has merit, because I think that a lot of candidates might shine in an in-person interview situation as opposed to just on paper, which is only one way of trying to get to know someone. So I'm interested in pursuing that, and I think this will give us all an opportunity to reflect on this very important decision. As we can tell, it is very meaningful to the community and also very meaningful to the work that we're doing. So I think that with some open minds and a bit more time and consideration and discussion, we might be able to come to more of a consensus on where we're heading. So I'm happy to second this, and I hope some colleagues will be interested as well.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor Lewis. I just want to start off with the way our council meeting started. We do a land acknowledgement, we sing O Canada, we support the Sikh community and other members in our community, and it reminded me of the diversity in our city. And even though I don't think this referral back is perfect. In fact, if it's not supported, I've got another referral back. But I do think it's really important that, for me, this referral back is a compromise. It is giving us an opportunity to start all over again. And I think we need to do that, to pause. I think it is a compromise that we can start all over again. We need to do that. We need to rectify, I think, the damage that we have caused in the community. So to me, I am hoping that we can get consensus on this council, because it is a compromise for me as well, to get this referral supported. I would encourage each and every one of you to do so. And let's take another stab at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Trussow.
I'm going to limit my comments now to the amendment that's on the floor. I'm very skeptical that this council is going to be able to reach a consensus on this issue, as I do think we're deeply divided. And it's just not a question of going through the applications again. It's a question of there's a worldview, there's a mindset, there's a set of values that's very, very deep. I believe that if we do this, we're going to, in all likelihood, wind up with the same two candidates or some group that's very close, and we're going to be right back. We're going to be right back where we are here. Now, I'm willing to let this play out because I think this is probably one of the most important discussions that this council is going to have during this term. So I want to do this right. I know where I stand on this, and I know what the votes are on this council right now from what I've read. While I'm skeptical of this amendment, I appreciate the mayor and Councillor Frank for trying, and I don't want to obstruct that. I would, however, like to offer an amendment which I hope will be taken as a friendly amendment. And it reads, and I have this written out, it further being noted that this process will be with regard to the reconciliation, equity, accessibility, and inclusion strategic area of focus in the 2023-2027 strategic plan and the Municipal Focused Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. And I'm hoping that that will be accepted as a friendly amendment.
So our mover is not in person. I'm hesitant to go back and forth on multiple amendments, whether they're friendly or not. I'm simply going to ask if you have a seconder for that, and then we will vote on it accordingly, unless the mayor, I can't see if the mayor has his hand up on the screen at the moment, but Councillor Rahman has indicated that she's willing to second it. So now we have an amendment to an amendment, and we'll look for questions and comments on the amendment to the amendment. The clerk is typing that up as quickly as possible so that we can get that wording for everyone to see. And I did say an amendment on the amendment. I should have said an amendment on the referral. Okay, the clerk has said it is now an e-scribe. If you want to refresh your screens, you should be able to read the language. So I'll look for any speakers to the amendment. At Councillor Hopkins' request, I'm just going to ask the clerk to read out that language, just so everybody hears it again.
Through the chair, the amendment reads as follows, that the proposed referral be amended by adding the following to the end of the clause. It being further noted that this process will be with regard to the reconciliation, equity, accessibility, and inclusion strategic area of focus in the 2023 to 2027 strategic plan and the municipal-focused Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action.
Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I'm happy to have this on the amendment.
Any other speakers to this? Okay. Councillor Hopkins, can I ask you to take the chair? I would like to speak to this. Actually, I'm going to seek some clarity, so if I can pass the chair to you.
Deputy Mayor or Acting Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So I need some clarity from the mover and seconder on this. It is an it being noted clause. I think that when we are talking about areas of the strategic plan, all areas of the strategic plan are always on the table. So I'm quite honestly looking for councillors' clarification on what this "it being noted" purpose is in this motion. I mean, I think we've all listened to concerns about diversity and inclusion. I think that many of us, a great many of us around this horseshoe, both in the last term and in this term already, have demonstrated through various actions willingness to work with different communities on all sorts of issues. So I'm trying to sense, is the councillor's intent that we are only going to include candidates from the 54 candidates who have identified with a diversity group? Are we, I'm just wondering through you, Madam Presiding Officer, if we can get some clarity from the mover on the intent of the "it being noted."
Councillor Trousseau, if you can go through the chair, please.
With respect, I believe it's very clear in terms of what I've written, but I'll go back and do it again. And by the way, the words "it being further noted" can be removed if that's what's causing the confusion. I think it's important to say this because I want the committee to know that they're not just starting over. They're starting over with a particular lens, and I would think that lens would be present anyway. I don't think it's redundant. I don't think it does any harm. I don't think it does any harm to repeat this. But I think that these 2 points. Number one, we have a very strong. Well, we have a very valid and strong. We put a lot of work into the reconciliation, equity, accessibility, and inclusion strategy. And I think it's worth acknowledging that. And also, again, there are several municipal-focused aspects to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. So I don't think this is redundant. I don't think it's contrary. I don't think it takes away anything that the committee can do. And no, it doesn't mandate. It doesn't mandate the selection of who's on that final list. But what it does do is it says this is a lens. We've acknowledged that we need to fix our process, and we're going to do that through the governance committee. I don't want to wait for the governance committee to deliberate in terms of what that lens is going to be. We've heard a lot from the community on that. So I think putting this in here right now foreshadows, I think quite correctly, the fact that there is going to be further guidance coming from the governance committee, but we want these points to be regarded here.
Acting Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I just wanted to get that clarity. I appreciate it. I don't have any issue. It being further noted was not the problem for me. I just wanted to understand that we were not removing any of the 54 candidates from the list that will go back to SPPC by applying this particular lens. I agree that this lens has to be applied just like it should be in any decision. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing it to the exclusion of anyone on the list, but hearing the councillor's response, I'm fine with this. So thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
I'll return the chair back to you. I have no speakers.
Thank you. And I did have Councillor Pribble on the main motion. Councillor Pribble, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the amendment to the motion, or if you wanted to wait until we return to the main motion.
I'll wait till the main motion.
Okay. Oh, Mayor Morgan, you have your hand up on Zoom. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for the road noise if it's loud. I just want to echo what the Deputy Mayor just said. I don't think a statement of values and priorities that we've committed to in the strategic plan and other motions of council is anything to be concerned about. I think that this is additive to the motion, and it's a fine it being noted clause. So I'll be supporting Councillor Trossau's addition.
Okay, so we have no other speakers that I'm aware of. Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lewis. I'd like to speak to the main motion unless you'd like me to speak now.
No, we will, if you'd like to wait and speak to the main motion. I have no other speakers on the amendment, so I was prepared to call the vote on the amendment, and then we will return to the main motion as amended.
Thank you.
So seeing no other speakers to the amendment, I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-1.
And just so folks know, I'm going to just wait a few seconds when the results of the vote come in so that people have an opportunity to see them on the screen before. So now we are to the main motion as amended, and I have Councillor Pribble, and then Councillor Cuddy, and then Councillor Pelosa, and then Councillor Ferreira. Councillor Pribble.
I would just like to state that even though I'm a person who doesn't like to delay things, I really think that the motion will help us as a council and to the public. I did have a detailed conducted interview with the two candidates, both of them over 1 hour long. And I have to tell you that I believe truly that this is the best way to do it. And at the end, we will make the best decision for what I always call 500,000 people of London. And I really think it will be helpful. So thank you for the motion. I will certainly be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Pribble. Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, Acting Mayor Lewis. I just want to speak to my colleagues that I will be supporting this motion, but I want to make a comment. I understood that this was a job interview. And I understood all of these committee appointments were job interviews. And over the number of years that I was in business, I've done a lot of job interviews. And candidates have reached out to me by phone to sell themselves, to make a better presentation than just merely a resume that I've received, because I really don't know anything about the candidate when I get a resume. But of the 54 candidates that applied for this position, 1 reached out to me. And that meant something to me, because that meant they wanted the job, because they wanted to sell themselves to me. And that meant a great deal. And I didn't want to go and chase down other candidates to speak to them to have them convince me that they were the best person for the job. So I have no reservations about supporting this motion, but I do think, as the mayor has suggested, that we have an issue with the way that we are selecting candidates for some of these committees. And I would go back to the library board as one. I currently sit on that committee, and I think we had a problem with that one. I know we did, and we all recognize that. So I think we need to take a long, hard look at how we select candidates in the future. And with that, I'll complete my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. I have Councillor Pelosa next.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'll start with the question to the mover and seconder, asking if they'd reached out in advance to the Indigenous Leadership Circle or NAMRIND, as they both submitted communications looking for feedback on their motion prior to it being tabled here today.
I think I don't know if Mayor Morgan is with us on Zoom. I know he sent me a text a moment ago that he was having signal issues, but if he's there, we'll go to the mover.
Yes, I hope you can hear me okay. I did not reach out to the two particular groups that that Councillor Pelosa mentioned. I did have a brief conversation about this with our staff in the anti-racism, anti-oppression division. So that was the conversation that I had, as well as the conversations with the other movers. I'd let Councillor Frank add anything, because I'm unsure if I'm coming across clear at this time, because the meeting is a little bit choppy to me.
Thank you. You came across fine. So, Annie Segoli, I want to start by thanking Ms. Morris and the work that she's done and city staff have done in the work that council sent out. And we made a priority in engaging communities who aren't traditionally engaged, who feel underrepresented or not represented at all in this space, recognizing as well that the government systems itself is set up on a colonial system, and traditionally they're not in this space and they're not seeing this space, and perhaps sometimes feeling that they're not welcome here, that they don't know our processes. So perhaps that's why some of us only heard from one candidate, because they didn't know they could reach out one-on-one when their application that was maybe missing a resume portion that came to us, that they didn't know they can come one-on-one to ask for our time behind the scenes, and if that was appropriate. I want to thank the allies in the gallery today, those who have sent letters and phone calls, social media messages, asking for us to do better and to keep listening to our community. In 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Report came up with 94 calls to action. 5 of those specifically deals with municipalities. And in 2015, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities also issued a report to help municipalities navigate these. London was featured in it with the work we were starting to do on diversity and inclusion in our staff. The first pathway within this report mentions fostering communities, alliances, and hope. Out of this process, I'm wondering how much hope there really is. We had 11 applications in the past for London Police Services Board and 54 this time. And to me, the difference in outcome didn't seem that much different. If we're talking about merit, I do believe that Joseph, already having Police Service Board experience, was a valid and excellent choice. Not taking anything away from Mr. Goss, as he's also an excellent person and dedicated to serving the community. Just I felt this was an opportunity to do better. In the Truth and Reconciliation for municipalities, reconciliation requires political will, joint leadership, trust, building, accountability, and transparency. In April 2022, that's when council directed that we start bringing forward a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our meetings. We say those words whenever we meet in these chambers, but do we actually make space for others? Or are they just hollow words with no actions to back them up? I believe someone bringing the Indigenous aspect to the space of intersectionalities, identity, and understanding the intergenerational trauma of generations caught in the, I can't even call it the justice system, but the correction system, and what's happening with the Indigenous children over generations of those who were caught up in the residential school system and those who avoided it but still had impacts, that it takes a leader from the community for nothing about them without them. And I would say that Indigenous Leadership Circle has spoken out that communications in our docket today. I'm also disappointed that this last-minute circulation of this motion only within half an hour prior to today's meeting, as we've been hearing from the community for weeks, or since the last week's meeting. I will say I am not in favor of supporting this referral today. I appreciate perhaps where some are intended to go with it. I believe unless those here are actually willing to change their vote or be open for consideration, to please just vote against it, because you're putting hours of work before us and fake hope for a community that's hoping to have impact in the community and actually be heard. So if this is more virtual signaling versus work to actually be done and hearing a unbiased opportunity, that's what I'm asking of you before you cast your vote. Whichever way you go, it's fine, it's our decision, we all come with different experience, but if you're not open to actually having that changed vote and an impact, vote accordingly. So Miigwech, Yako, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pelosa. Councillor Ferreira.
And thank you, Acting Mayor, and through you. I have a question, but I'll leave that to the end, just for the way the motion sits right now. But I just first wanted to say, thank you to the community for actually, coming up and speaking up and engaging. We have a fresh election in our mind where the turnout was quite low. And it is a big thing that we speak about in the halls, our concern with that. So when we have the community speaking to us, we need to start listening to show that we do listen. The more we listen, the more engagement we get, the better things are. So I feel like that is a good process moving forward. Speaking to the candidates, we have two good candidates, in my opinion, one better than the other, just because he has more relevant qualifications. He's on a police board as we speak, when compared to the other candidate who, does have police experience on the HR side, but that is a few years back. And we can fit that diversity and inclusion lens with that. So I do think that that is the correct way to go. I have chosen my candidate, and I would like to keep that choice moving along. So it kind of leads into the question. So I see there's 5 recommendations or 5 candidates for interviews, and I just wanted to have a little bit of extra clarification on how that process actually works to select those 5. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferreira. I'm going to turn to Mayor Morgan to see if he would like to provide some clarity on the 5 selection process. I did speak to him about it earlier today, so if he does break up, I will offer some comment myself, but I will turn to him first as the mover. Mayor Morgan, are you still with us?
Yes, and I can certainly comment on that. It will be up to SPPC to determine the process for the 5. We do have the technology system available to us. I will say where it has failed when we have a single candidate, it has been actually quite helpful when there are multiple candidates. And so, if you have 5, each person has 5 choices that they can forward in, and then you find, the top choices, and that's where you see where the consensus is. The idea about this is to try to find that wider consensus for council. And I just want to comment, if you'll allow me, I want to be clear. I am willing to move my vote. I ranked, 8 people, and I think there are excellent people within that group. And I think a process such as this allows for the space for those who may not have heard or had the ability to express their preferences on those beyond, where the process landed us, have an opportunity to, express their support for those candidates as well. So I'll leave it at
that. Thank you, Mayor Morgan. I'm just going to turn back to Councillor Ferreira and see if he's comfortable with that answer in terms of the reason for the 5 for now, knowing that this will go back to SPPC, and there can be some more debate about the 5, the process. But as I think Mayor Morgan was indicating, as we have with other boards and commissions, rather than just having one vote, we would each be able to put our top 5, and that would hopefully give us a list of 5 for a short list after that.
And thank you, and thank you, Acting Mayor, and through you. So because we've done a lot of the work and we have selected a couple of the candidates, I would feel a little bit more comfortable in supporting the motion if we did have some language that kind of spoke to that, just so we can not waste any work that we've already done. Just because I do see consensus on 2 candidates. The one candidate that I obviously want to see be put into that seat, that's really what I'm kind of vouching for. I would like to see some type of language that does show the work that we've already done, if that is a possibility. That would make me support this motion just a little bit more.
So I'm going to seek some clarity from you, Councillor Ferreira. And I think that the question that I asked of Councillor Trussow earlier on his addition was relevant to that. My understanding is, and certainly the mover of the amendments comments were that absolutely those 2 candidates who were in the runoff election already, we are certainly free and open to put their names forward for that short list. I suspect, given the level of support that they both had, that there would be people ranking one or both of them potentially in their top 5. I can only speak for myself in terms of I actually did rank 5 when I was reading through the resumes, and both of them were in my top 5. So both of those would be names that I would be selecting when this goes back to SPPC. I don't know if other councillors are necessarily finding themselves in the same position, but I think that given the level of support we saw for both, that both of those 2 names would be amongst the 5 shortlisted. And I'm just going to see if, I'm going to turn back to you, Councillor Ferreira, and see if is that helpful for you, or is there something further that you are looking for on this?
It's helpful. I am hopeful that the candidates that the candidate that we have looked at to right now does sit at the top of the list. I'm just a little worried just because the language doesn't specifically say that. So that's just really what my concern is at this point. I'm not sure how the language would actually look, because I did see this motion a little bit last minute, so I didn't really have some time to think about how that would correct for that, but that is a concern that I just wanted to bring to council here.
Thank you, and I think I would say, as with all of these things, ultimately we're in each other's hands when this goes back to SPPC to put those names forward. Looking for any other speakers on this motion? Oh, Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. A couple of points here. Just a short time ago, council sitting as a committee did its job and did it by the rules. And we had a winner fair and square from that committee. Now today it comes to council and presto bamo, it's not good enough. It's basically inferring that we did not do our jobs, that it needs to be reconsidered. And why? Because the wrong candidate in some minds was chosen, even though that was a minority position. The majority of councillors voted for a candidate, and as I stated, he won, and he won fair and square. Now, again, it comes before us today, and it's laced with things like identity politics, racism. We only have to remind ourselves that it was just a short time ago when we appointed a person to the police board. And she took that position. And after we had selected her as a committee and as a council, there was no hullabaloo, there was no hue and cry. It was accepted and everything moved on. The rules were fine at that point. And again, that was just a short time ago, but clearly, quote unquote, the correct person won. Now, this person decided, for reasons only she knows, to vacate that position. And now we find ourselves in a position to replace. And we've done it just exactly the same way we did it before. We came up with a name. That name clearly is not good enough in some eyes. And so we're working with these contortions to try and shoehorn somebody else. So I am not going to support this motion. As stated, we've done our job. Some don't like it. Well, that's democracy. That's how democracy works. And democracy does not require unanimity. So I reject that argument that we have to go towards a unanimous configuration or quote unquote more consensus, when in fact that's not how our system of governance works. So I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Meerbergen. Looking for anyone who has not spoken to the main motion as amended. Councillor Hopkins. And then Councillor Hopkins, just to advise you, when you're done speaking, I'm going to ask you to take the chair again so that I can speak to the main motion too.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lewis. I am going to repeat what I said on the amendment. We have to rectify the damage that has been done in the community. This is a start. And I think it's very, very important to know we started off looking at staff, reaching out to stakeholders in the community, getting 54 applications. We were off to a great start. I had a number of qualified applicants to choose from on the list. But I do think we need to rectify the damage, and this is a way of resetting. To me, it is a bit of a compromise. I wish we weren't here, but we are here. We are having a conversation around this horseshoe right now, which is what we didn't do at the beginning. We needed to do that. So thank you to each and every one for your perspectives. We don't all have to agree. It's just having the conversation and understanding the community has responded. How do we move forward? I think we need to do that. And looking forward, as this goes back to SPPC, where we will have a further conversation on how we are going to address the 5 moving forward and the interviews. So with that, again, I appreciate having this opportunity to speak to the main motion. And with that, I will now go to the Deputy Mayor Lewis for his comments.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And I will try and be brief. I'm not going to repeat things that everybody has already said so well. I will, however, say the reason I'm supportive of this is because I am open to changing my vote. As I said, I ranked 5 candidates when I was reviewing the applications. Both of the 2 candidates who were in the final vote were in my top 5. There's also a woman who's a person of color who attracted my attention very strongly and was ranked 3rd for me. I'm going to put her name forward when this goes back to SPPC if that's approved too. Because I think there were individuals, a number of individuals with lots of merit in this process. I am not going to go into this process presuming who the successful candidate might be at the end. I'm going to commit to reviewing the 5 applications and sitting through the interviews of the 5 individuals that we as a collective group choose as our top 5 at SPPC. And I hope that that's the process that all members will go into this with. I will say that I think some of the divisive language that we've heard out in the community has not been particularly helpful when you look at the fact that no one vote can project a set of values on a person. There's a continuum. You know, I think about how the last council, in filling a vacancy for a seat at this horseshoe, put the first hijab-wearing Muslim woman on this body to make decisions on behalf of the people of London as a representative of the Muslim community. Not all members of council at the time supported that, but I certainly did not question any of their commitments to diversity because they weighed those candidates who we had to choose from based on a set of criteria that they had for themselves. I know that diversity was part of their decision-making factor. I don't question that at all. But they chose, at the end of the day, to support another person. And that is fine because to Councillor Van Meerbergen's point, we don't have to agree. But I do think that there is a process here by which we can come to a broader consensus. And to Councillor Frank's point earlier, I genuinely believe that when we have an opportunity to sit down face-to-face with the human beings behind these resumes, we can learn more about what they may offer to the Police Services Board. And I am working, and I will say I am working, and I've had a conversation written because we didn't have time to talk in person this morning, but I had a conversation with Councillor Pelosa about bringing forward some recommendations to the next SPPC to refer the entire process to the governance working group for a review and some recommendations to improve the process moving forward. The mayor said it earlier in his comments. Twice already in this term of council now, we've seen that the process has left us with a result that we as a council, as a whole, are not satisfied with. That tells me that we need to look at the process and take ownership of it and make changes that we can all believe in to make the process better. So I hope that colleagues will support not only the motion before us today, but hopefully we will, and I certainly hope that we won't be circulating it at the last moment. We plan to have it on the agenda in time for you to see the motion to refer this to Governance Working Group 2, but I hope colleagues will support that as well, because I think we have identified that the process needs some improvement. The Police Services Board needs a member, so we cannot, to Councillor Trussell's point, we can't wait for Governance Working Group to perhaps take 6 or 8 months to really go through the process and fine tune it. We do need to fill this position sooner than later. So in the spirit of that, this interim motion is hopefully going to add a new step that we can consider at Governance Working Group as well. But I do think that this is a path forward that is worthy of all of our support, because I think that we've identified a problem, and while we may not have the perfect solution yet, what we are potentially going down the road on today is a solution to better outcomes in the long run. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
I have no other speakers, and I will return the chair back to you.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I'll resume with the chair. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on what the Deputy Mayor touched on. And that is this. With regards to personal attacks that I have read in the last couple of weeks has been very disturbing. Other councillors have mentioned participation in our process. We were fortunate to have 57 applicants apply for this job. My concern is that next time around we won't, because when they see attacks on themselves personally and on their families, they'll think twice before putting their name out in the public session. You know, these are volunteer roles to participate. These are not elected roles. Like we knew that going into our jobs, that we would get this, and that's fine. That was our choice to run and get into public service. But we have so many volunteer agencies in our city that require private citizens to step up and give back. And what I've seen in the last few weeks and read, if I was out there considering putting my name forward, I would definitely think twice. So I caution those that talk about this process, by all means, talk about the process, talk about pros and cons, et cetera, but please lay off personal attacks on the candidates. It's not healthy for democracy, it's not healthy for our city, and it's not healthy for the boards and commissions that we hope to populate.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I have Councillor McAllister and Councillor Rahman on the list next. Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. One of the things that I've heard this afternoon that I think is very important is there's an acknowledgement around the Horseshoe that our selection process is flawed. And we need to take the opportunity to speak with the candidates directly. Not everyone is aware of the processes that are part of this selection. I know that work needs to be done on the selection process, and I know that we will work on that in governance. This is an important decision, and council really should take the time to consider the candidates and do these face-to-face interviews. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAllister. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, Acting Mayor. This is a tough conversation to have. And I want to start by saying, you know, sometimes you leave meetings with regrets, and I left SPPC the last time with the regret that I hadn't spoken up. And I thought long and hard about why I didn't comment that day. And I felt I didn't comment because sometimes I feel like the conversation about diversity sometimes is a very challenging one to have in this horseshoe, sitting where I sit in the body that I sit in. So I just want to say first, you know, that was my regret, and I wish I had spoken up. But I do feel like if I had spoken up, I would have known how that conversation would have went. And that's an unfortunate feeling as well. And it, to me, speaks to some of the work that we as individuals in the roles that we took on have to do. And I'm being blatantly honest. I mean, I think that we, in the roles that we have taken on, the decision-making that we are committing ourselves to, the strategic plan that we are committing ourselves to, and with all the other committees, boards that we sit on, that we are committing to, that we have to be willing to do the work necessary to make sure that we're taking into consideration and bringing to the table the lenses that are necessary. And when we can't bring those lenses, we are appointing people to these roles that can. We reached out to the community. We got 54 applications. Tremendous. And I'm so pleased to see so much willingness from the community when it comes to these appointments. But today we're having a conversation around process. Yes, this is a process conversation, but it is also a lens conversation. So when does that conversation come in? When do we have more conversation with the community about the work we need to do to be able to not have to continue to come back and look at our decisions and say we missed something, to be reminded that we missed something. So yes, process, and I'm thankful for my colleague, Councillor Trousseau, for bringing up the importance of adding that amendment in to include the lens, but that means that we are signing up, we are agreeing today that when we meet at SPPC, that lens is part of the work we're going to bring to the table again. So that's what we're signing up for by voting for this today. We're signing up to agree that this is the worldview that we're going to put towards this process. And so I agree with Councillor Pelosa. If we're not there, if we're going to take the time, if we're going to again raise the expectation in the community that things are going to change and our committees and our boards are going to look differently, then yes, absolutely, let's go back, let's do the process again, let's do the work necessary. And I'm still conflicted about where I stand on that. And hope is a difficult thing to keep going back, but I want to be hopeful, and I want to be hopeful that we can make a different decision and make a decision that we can broadly all support. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. I'm looking to see if there are any other speakers There can't be too many more because most of us have spoken. I am not seeing any further speakers, so I'm going to ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote. Motion carries 13-2.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the 12th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. And moving along to item 8.3 in our standing committees is the 5th report of the Planning and Environment Committee. We may have to call a recess soon just so Councillor Lehman's legs get a break, but I'm going to call on him as the chair of Planning and Environment Committee to present that report now.
Thank you. I haven't heard of any items wishing, or any people wishing to pull any items, Acting Mayor.
Okay, so I am looking to colleagues to see if there's anything from the agenda that they want dealt with separately. And this is on the 5th report of the Planning and Advisory Committee. This will be followed by the 6th report. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. With regard to number 9 on the agenda, 3.2 from Planning, Halls Mill Road, if that could be called separately so I can vote on that. But I do have a question, and that is, is it possible to vote for the preamble motion and not the ABC? Can they be split and called separately?
Councillor Van Meerbergen, I'm going to rely on the clerk's wisdom for that. But since we're going to have it pulled to be dealt with separately, perhaps we could give them a moment to discuss that, sure, and we can deal with the remainder of the agenda.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, so we've had a request to pull item 9, that's 3.2 from the committee agenda with regard to 247 Halls Mill Road. Looking to see if there's anything else colleagues wish to have dealt with separately. I'm not seeing any. So Councillor Lehman, you're prepared to move items 1 through 8?
I'll move items 1 through 8, yes.
Thank you. And I will look to colleagues for any questions or comments on items 1 through 8 of the 5th report of planning. I'm seeing none. So bear with us for just a moment while the clerks are doing their work, and we will get the vote opened on items 1 through 8 of the 5th report of the Planning and Environment Committee.
Councillor Frank. Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Okay, we're going to go back to item 9. This is the Halls Mill Road. Councillor Van Meerbergen, I just want to advise you that the clerks have looked at your request. While we can call A, B, and C separately, there is not a vote on the preamble itself. If you wish to change conditions of the recommendation from committee, you would have to propose an amendment to the conditions.
Okay, my personal preference, and I can move this, is that be approved in the main part of the motion before the subsections, eliminate subject to the following terms and conditions, and including the A, B, and C. So the motion would read up to be approved with a period, and the rest of it would be deleted.
Okay, give me just one moment. I'm just going to check with the clerks on this. But I believe it would not be on the recommendation of the Director of Planning and Development. It would be contrary to the recommendation of the Director. Okay, so in conversation with our clerks on process, Councillor Van Meerbergen, I think what you're proposing is that notwithstanding the recommendation of the Director of Planning and Development and the advice of the Heritage Planner, that the request to remove the heritage attributes from the property at 247 Halls Mills Road pursuant to Section 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act be approved and then we would have no conditions, there would be no subsections. Is that the intent of what you're seeking?
That'd be the intent.
Do you have a seconder for that? Okay, I see Councillor Hillier is prepared to second that. So I'm just going to bear with us for a second here. I need to check with the clerk because the committee recommendation was to support the recommendation of the Director. I think the amendment you're proposing is contrary to the committee recommendation. So I think that we have to, and I'm just going to consult with the clerk here for a moment, but I think we have to defeat the committee recommendation first before we can put an alternate motion on the floor. Okay, the clerks in their wisdom have provided some further advice on this. It is still an approval, so it's not directly contrary to the motion approved at committee. So the clerks are advising that it can be moved as an amendment. That would be in order. And then if the amendment is approved, then the approval would be granted without conditions. If the amendment is defeated, then we would revert to the main committee motion. So we have a mover and a seconder in Councillor Van Meerbergen and Councillor Hillier. Looking for questions and comments on the amendment. And I will give folks a chance to just quickly read that so that they can double check the language. But I have Councillor Frank first on the speakers list.
Thank you, and through you, I'd like to ask a question of staff, if possible. And I'm hoping that they can refresh my memory as to why we are requesting that the resident remove things by hand. I understand it's to preserve the foundation, so I guess I'm requesting through the chair further information and a reminder as to why maintaining the foundation is an important thing.
So, Mr. Mathers, are we going to you on that or to Ms. McNeely?
Through the acting mayor. So we are currently going through a conservation review board process. So maintaining the remaining portion that may have some historical significance would be important to be able to continue to pursue that process.
Thank you, Mr. Mathers. Councillor Frank?
Thank you. And if possible, I do know that most of the courts are somewhat backed up, so I'm just wondering what is the timeline overall, if you know about that process? How long would it take for that to be resolved? Thank you.
Well, let's ask our learned staff if they have a crystal ball that could ballpark a timeline on that for them.
Through the acting mayor, we don't have a time. It would be up to that board to be able to reestablish this file, so we don't have a time.
Thank you, Mr. Mathers. Councillor Frank?
Thank you, that's all.
Councillor McAllister?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. And through you, further to Councillor Frank's questions, I don't know if it's possible to have a supervised removal, but it does seem, I mean, I believe the individual in question is in his 80s. I understand we don't want people to do demolitions without approval, but it does seem a bit heavy-handed, and I'm just wondering if there is any other alternative that we could work with under the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
And we will go to staff on that. We'll give Mr. Mathers and Ms. McNeely just a moment. Mr. Mathers?
Through the acting mayor, this plan was developed working with the owner of the property, and it was their proposal, and it went through some discussions between our legal staff and their lawyers. So this is something that they brought to us. So maybe that would be something that was important as part of the consideration.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure, Councillor McAllister, did that answer your question?
So just to confirm, sorry, through the acting mayor, that this was done in consultations, because my confusion lies with the owner seems to have come out quite vocally saying that it wasn't. So I'm just confused as to is this a he said kind of situation, or I mean, is this actually a plan that was developed with them, or is this us having to follow the Heritage Act to the strict letter of the law?
Mr. Mathers.
Through the acting mayor, so this is their attempt to align with the Heritage Act, and what they have suggested their approach would be to be able to align with those requirements.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hopkins next, and then Councillor Trussell.
Yes, thank you. And I would encourage my colleagues not to support this amendment. And one of the reasons why I would encourage you not to support the amendment, that there is a long history on this one. And the history, I will just start with where it is at now. I'll speak to the main motion later on, but right now, this is a demolition permit request. It is at the Conservation Heritage Appeal Board, and for the appeal board to go forward, the debris that sits on top of the foundation needs to be removed. The removal is to have a plan with the owner and with the City of London to come up with a plan to remove it, not using machinery. Obviously, if the machinery goes on top of this foundation to remove the debris, the damage will be caused with the foundation, which is to be determined if it is going to be of heritage significance. But the reason this permit is being requested is to move forward to determine that. And that is what is in front of us. And that needs to be done. And I would encourage committee, council, to support staff's recommendation, who have a plan and will be working with the owner to come up with the plan. I have heard lots of misinformation in the community that we are making an 80-year-old man remove the debris by hand. The plan is still to be determined. The recommendation is not to use machinery. So again, colleagues, I would ask you not to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Trussell.
I'll keep this really short because I just want to support what was just said. I'm going to support the staff report. I'm not going to support the amendment. There is nothing in here that says that this particular gentleman has to go out and do this himself. And to read some of the comments in the public, well, I think it really doesn't understand the difference between a property owner acting in their individual capacity and a property owner acting in their relationship to the property. Where is the property owner? They can cause somebody else at their expense, but they can cause somebody else to go out and do the physical labor. So I think a lot of the suggestions that were being retributive to an elderly gentleman, I just think it's wrong. And I fully support the staff report here, and I hope council rejects the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trussow. Any other speakers? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote. Oh, Councillor Van Meerbergen, you've introduced this motion, but you haven't actually spoken to it, so I will give a little leeway in your rationale behind your motion if you want to speak to it now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I would like to speak to this. It just seems reasonable, as has been stated. The owners are in their 80s. Their intention for this piece of property was to subdivide the land and actually use it for infill housing. And yet we seem to be caught up in this crumbling foundation. I don't know for what purpose or what the end goal here is. Perhaps there are some that think that this rivals Hadrian's Wall, and maybe we'll have blocks and blocks of buses, tour buses lined up to see this crumbling foundation, but I highly doubt it. So again, we need to say to ourselves, what makes sense here? Saving a foundation, and then again, for what purpose? On private property, of course. So I would urge people to take the common sense approach. Councillors take the common sense approach, and vote for this amendment, and certainly vote against the main motion.
Thank you, Councillor. I have no other. Councillor Pribble.
I would just like to support this, and I will be supporting this motion. I'm a guy that tremendously believes in history and heritage. I will always support it, but this, in terms of the common sense, I don't. I will support this motion.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the motion, to the amendment? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote on the amendment.
Closing the vote. Motion is lost 7-8.
Okay, that brings us back to the committee recommendation. Councillor Lehman has put that on the floor. We'll look to any speakers to the committee recommendation before we call the vote. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to speak to this. I am the councillor of the ward. There's a lot of history on this site, but I'll just start with 2019, leading to this demolition permit. And I would like to start off saying that we are not making a decision here on the foundation and the determination of the foundation. That is going to be decided in the court where it's at right now. So starting in 2019, and I'm doing this just so council is a little bit familiar with a bit of history on this property. So in 2019, December, a demolition request came forward from Latch, which is the Heritage Advisory Group, former Latch, CACP. They were consulted, and they issued an intention to designate. Council advised to designate, and in January, 2020, council supported intentions to designate January 2020, the accessory building on the property known as the Red Barn was demolished by the owner without municipal council's approval. The appeal received by the city in February 2020 and referred to the Conservation Review Board on March 2020, and that's where it is at the moment. May 2020, the owner and the city agreed that the debris on the site would need to be removed in order to identify the extent of the remaining foundation. And that is really important to understand because that is what we're allowing this permit for. We are not making any decisions. We are trying to assess the determination of if it is of any heritage significance so it can proceed in the appeal process. You know, that, and here we are today. The owner was fined. That was already taken care of. So we need to go forward with this. I would think it's in the best interest of the community and of the owner if we proceed with this recommendation, and I'm hoping I can get support here to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Any further speakers to the motion? See none, so I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Councillors Purple and Ferreira. Closing the vote, motion carries 13-2.
Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Lehman.
And that concludes the fifth report of the Planning and Environment Committee, and I'd like to, with your permission, continue on to the sixth report of the Planning and Environment Committee.
That is the next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
Councillor Lehman.
I've had no request to pull any of the 9 items on the committee agenda.
So I'm just going to look briefly to colleagues to see if there are any items that you wish dealt with separately from the sixth report of the Planning and Environment Committee. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Number 9, 3.7 from Planning, dealing with 614 Westmount Crescent. If I could have the A portion and B portion separated out on a separate vote.
Well, how about we deal with that one completely separately, Councillor, and then we can have a divided vote on those 2 sections.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, so we've had a request to have number 9 pulled. Any other items? I'm not seeing any other takers. Councillor Lehman, are you prepared to move the balance of the report?
I will put 1 through 8 on the floor.
Okay, so we have 1 through 8 of the 6th report of Planning and Environment on the floor. Looking to see if there's any speakers. I see none, so we will ask the clerks to open the vote.
Councillor Van Meerbergen. Thank you. Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
We've had item 9 requested to be pulled for a separate vote. And Councillor Van Meerbergen, I'm going to go back to you and just clarify. You are looking for Part A and all of its numbered subclauses and Part B dealt with separately?
Correct. Could we call A and B separately?
Okay, we can do that. We just need to give the clerks a moment to separate those out. And while they are doing that, I will look for any speakers on the motion. Okay, I see none, so we will start with section A of the committee report. We will ask the clerks to open the vote for that. Bear with us for just a moment.
Councillor McAllister, Councillor Ferreira.
Councillor Ferreira had to take a bio break.
Thank you. Closing the vote. Motion carries 12-1.
All right, and we will now, if Councillor Lehman's prepared to put part B on the floor.
I'll put B on the floor.
And we will look for any questions or comments on that. I will share, I know a couple of councillors have needed to step out, take a quick break. It is 3 o'clock. We have been at this for about 2 hours now. Councillor Lehman in particular has been standing for about 2 hours now. So after we conclude the 6th report of the Planning and Environment Committee, I am going to ask Council's indulgence for a quick 10-minute recess. And we will get right back to it and hopefully finish in good time. But we have the 6th report of the Planning and Environment Committee, 9, Part B, and we'll ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
Councillor Trosso. We'll mark you absent. Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Councillor Lehman.
And that concludes the 6th report, Planning and Environment Committee, and I will now take my chair.
Thank you, and thank you for the stalwart work today in presenting all of those extra committee reports that normally would fall to me. I appreciate you standing in my stead. Colleagues, as I indicated, I know that we've been at this for a little over 2 hours. I know we have some members in the gallery who are here to hear a discussion around the Community and Protective Services agenda. We still have the Corporate Services Committee agenda to get through as well. So I'm going to look to see if there's a willingness for a 10-minute recess. I'm seeing some nods from Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Hillier. So we will, Councillor Hopkins, are you okay to move that? And Councillor Hillier, you'll second. We can do this by hand. All those in favor?
That motion carries.
So to members of the public, we appreciate your patience. We'll be back in 10 minutes to resume the rest of the agenda. I am seeing no hands up and a shaking of heads. So I think we will open the vote on, Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you. Nothing I wanted pulled, just an opportunity to speak to 4.2, being the insurance of proclamation for GBS. Realizing you hear from me every year on this. So for those who are new, GBS is extremely rare, and it's an autoimmune disorder. When your body's done fighting a cold, your cold's gone, but it's still looking for something to fight. So it eats the coating off your nerve system, which will eventually shut down your respiratory system and be fatal, potentially. It can be reoccurring. My son had this a couple years ago when James, he's still in high school, and London Health Sciences did a wonderful job in treating him, so forever grateful for their staff. But even more so, the cure for GBS is human plasma. So I always do a shout out to Canadian Blood Services. We have a wonderful plasma location right here in London on Warncliffe Road in Ward 12. And you can make a convenient appointment to go in. And there's only, I believe, 3 plasma locations now in Ontario to donate. So we're extremely lucky to have one in London. And that is one that is rare and life-saving. And it really is a gift of life. So thank you to donors and for our healthcare professionals and for colleagues for hearing us today.
Thank you, Councillor Pelosa. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you. And I just would like to speak to number 5, 2.4, which is the 2022 annual update on Budweiser Gardens. I understand we are just receiving a report. We are not, and maybe through you to staff, just to make sure I understand what we're doing here today. We are not approving anything going forward, renovations or anything other than just receiving the report.
Ms. Barbone.
Thank you through the chair. That is absolutely correct. This is the annual report that reports out on the progress, and based on the net cash flow, the city receives an annual amount. So this is our annual report that brings that forward and shows what the annual amount is that the city has received. And the report highlights that there has been discussion about an expansion for a number of years. That will be the subject of a future report, and information would be brought forward for a council decision, and information supporting that in the future months.
Councillor Hopkins.
I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I have no one else on the speakers list, so I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Councillor Van Meerbergen. Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues, and I will advise council that the mayor is no longer with us as he's now in his scheduled meetings with the ministers around the Health and Homelessness Summit results. So moving on, our next standing committee report is the 6th report of the Community and Protective Services Committee. I will call on Chair Pelosa to present that report.
Thank you. I've been given notice to pull item 10, looking to council to see if there's any others.
Are there any other items councillors wish dealt with separately? I see none, Councillor.
Thank you. So item 10's been pulled, being the infrastructure update for the Thames outdoor pool, as there is a motion coming forward. In regards to items 1 through 12, excluding 10, I will put them all on the floor, noting that all votes were unanimous at committee. Item 4.2 is a resolution to end homelessness and dealing with work on the Ontario Big City Mayors and AMO. So thank you to Councillor Hopkins and Mayor Morgan for their work on that file. And the subsidized bus pass program, we did receive a delegate, and their request is going to be coming forward to you in the multi-year budget process via a business case. And everything else was a wonderful conversation as always.
Thank you, Councillor. And I have Councillor Hopkins on the speakers list to your report. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, if I may, I would like to thank the committee on supporting 4.2, the resolutions to end homelessness from OBCM resolutions, as well as AMO. As you know, it is a challenge within many, many municipalities in Ontario. And I want to give my hopes and wishes for a successful meeting that the mayor is going to have with the minister right now as we talk about homelessness and healthcare and how the two are combined. But I also want to acknowledge the provincial government in the budget coming out of over a week ago, putting out some money to support homelessness in municipalities as well as for mental health. So again, I think sometimes it's these little baby steps along the way. So thank you to the committee for supporting the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Any other speakers to the Community and Protective Services agenda with the exception of item 10? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you. I'm item 10 being 2.6, the infrastructure update of the Thames outdoor pool on the floor, realizing Councillor Frank has amendment she would like to put forward, and the clerk has the wording for that.
And we will go to Councillor Frank to introduce her amendment.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to start off by welcoming the folks in the gallery from Old South. As you can see, they are enthusiastic in ensuring that we are continuing on with this process. And I appreciate them showing their support for the Thames Pool, as we all heard from the numerous emails over the past couple weeks. And as I've heard at my town hall that I had over the weekend, and at a meeting I had directly with Old South Community Organization, the Thames Pool remains top of mind for residents in Ward 11, and I'm sure across the city. If you'd like to purchase a shirt to support the pool, you can buy them at Shashwa, which is a store in Wortley Village. So, and check out some of the other nice stores we have in the village. The reason why I'm bringing this up is I've spoken with staff and they've informed me that it will take until July to get the results back on the scoping work, which we have in Part A of the motion. And so just to make sure that we're not setting unrealistic deadlines for staff, I wanted to amend the June to the July. And then they added clarifying language that will be providing an updated condition assessment to identify the scope of the repairs, as well as the associated costs to reopen the Thames Pool for next summer. So just hoping to seek your support on that amendment, as well as just overall hoping you support and continue to support this recommendation, as the Thames Pool, again, is incredibly important for this community. And I think we need to do our due diligence and community consultation, as well as looking under all the stones for any solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Pelosa, as the committee chair, has indicated she's seconding your amendment. So we'll look for any discussion on that. I see none. So I'm just going to make sure that the clerks have the language in the system, and then we will get the vote open on the motion as amended. Ms. Westlake Power, in her infinite wisdom, has advised me first we have to vote on the amendment and then we'll vote on it as amended. So we'll open the vote on the amendment first.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues. And now we will entertain any discussion on the main motion as amended. And seeing none, I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Councillor Pelosa?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor, and that concludes the City for the Community Protective Services Committee.
Thank you. And I will now call on Councillor Rahman for the Civic Works Committee.
Thank you, and through you, Acting Mayor. We dealt with the Civic Works Committee on March 21st, the fifth meeting. We discussed items that are before you, item 2.1 through 2.13. Item of discussion for the day, we talked a lot about the Hamilton Road and Highbury Avenue intersection, and you'll see before you the amendment that was put forward and passed at committee. Happy to take any questions from council.
So first, we will see if anybody wants anything pulled to be dealt with separately. I'm seeing none. So now we will look to council for any questions or comments. I'm seeing none. Councillor Rahman, I think you and Ms. Scher get off with the shortest report award today. I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Thank you, and that concludes the report.
Thank you, Councillor Rahman. Moving right along to item 9, added reports. I will call on Councillor Cuddy to report out on closed session.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and through you, Council went into closed session, and the report is as follows. The progress was made with respect to items 4, 1, 4, 2, 4.3, as noted on the public agenda, 6.1, 12, SPPC, 6.16, PEC, and 6.16, CSC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. Moving on, deferred matters, item 10, there are none. Item 11 is inquiries. I've not been made aware of any. Item 12 is emergent motions. We have none, but before we go into 13, which is bylaws, under emergent motions, we do have an added bylaw with regard to Bill 105. That is 13.8, and I am going to call on Mr. Mathers to just give us a brief update. This was related to a communication in regard to Bill 105. Mr. Mathers?
Through the acting mayor, this was a request made by a developer to have a change made to a bylaw, and we are in concurrence. There is a little bit more work to do, so we would recommend it being referred back to staff.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mathers. So I'm just looking to see if we can have a mover and a seconder to refer that back to our staff. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Cuddy. And Councillor Trussell.
I just want to make sure that this is without prejudice to our timelines and that the developer has agreed to that explicitly.
Mr. Mathers?
Through the acting mayor, yes, it is without prejudice to the timelines. It's not going to have any other impact.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote on the referral.
Counselor Rahman? Oh, thank you. Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues. That moves us along to bylaws. I have had a request from Councillor Van Meerbergen to vote on number 116, bylaw number 116 separately. Does anyone want anything else voted on separately in bylaws? Seeing none, then I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder for bylaws, and this is Bill number 98 through 115 inclusive. Moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lehman. There's no discussion at first reading, so we will open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
And looking for a mover and a seconder for second reading of bills 98 through 115 inclusive. Moved by Councillor Ferreira, seconded by Councillor McAllister. There is discussion at second reading. If anyone wishes to have some, now is the time. I am seeing none, so we will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
And looking for a mover and a seconder for third reading of bills 98 through 115 inclusive. Moved by Councillor Pribble, seconded by Councillor Trussow. There's no vote on third reading, so we will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
Thank you, colleagues. That just leaves Bill 116 to be dealt with. This is the bylaw to amend the rezoning at 614 Westmount Crescent. So I will look for a mover and a seconder for bylaw 116. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier. We will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 13-1.
Thank you, colleagues, and we will look for a mover and a seconder for second reading of bill number 116. Moved by Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Cuddy. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 13-1.
And looking for a mover and a seconder for third and final reading of bill number 116. Moved by Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor McAllister, and we will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, motion carries 13-1.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes bylaws. We have just one item left on the agenda. That's item 14, and that's a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Hillier, and we can do this by hand. All those in favor?
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Good conversation today. Thanks, as always, to our fantastic staff for their hard work and their patience with us. And we look forward to seeing you again all soon.